I found my granddaughter locked in a basement. She was shaking, barefoot on the concrete floor, whispering through cracked lips. "Grandma," they said I was nothing, that our family was trash. "Please don't leave me here." I carried her out, drove her to my house, and called my sister. I said one thing, "Dorothy, remember what Mama taught us about fighting back? It's time. This is a story based on real events." "Hello, my dears." Set everything aside for a moment. I want to share a story that might change the way you see the people closest to you. Write in the comments where you're watching from. We hope you enjoy listening. November had already stripped the trees bare when it happened. The wind came howling down from the hills, carrying that particular chill that settles in your bones and refuses to leave. I was driving home from the church food pantry where I volunteer every Thursday. My old Ford pickup loaded with leftover canned goods I planned to drop off at the women's shelter on Saturday. My name is Constance Holliday. Most people in Barron County, Kentucky, call me Connie. I'm 63 years old, a retired schoolteacher who spent 34 years teaching 5th grade at the same elementary school. My husband, Earl, passed away 8 years ago from a heart attack while fixing the barn roof. Since then, it's been me, my garden, my 2 cats, and Sunday dinners with whatever family shows up. I'm not a remarkable woman by most standards. Average height, silver hair I keep in a braid, reading glasses perpetually hanging from a chain around my neck. But people around here know me. They know I don't back down and I don't lie, and they know that the Holliday women have spines made of something harder than bone. My mother, Loretta, raised 4 daughters on a tobacco farm after our father left when I was 9. She worked 18-hour days, never complained, never asked for help, and never once let any of us believe we were less than anyone else in this county. Tough stock, the neighbors called us. Sometimes with admiration, sometimes as a warning. My phone rang while I was navigating the curve past Miller's Creek. A number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Holliday?" A woman's voice. Young, nervous, speaking. "This is Amara Jenkins. I work at the Prescott house. Your granddaughter, she needs you. Right now." My blood went cold. My granddaughter, Sophie, 28 years old, married 3 years ago to Trent Prescott, the youngest son of one of the wealthiest families in the region. The Prescotts owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties, had a name on the hospital wing, and sat in the front pew at First Baptist every Sunday morning. Trent seemed decent enough when Sophie brought him home, polite, well-dressed, soft-spoken. But his mother, Vivian Prescott, looked at our family like we were mud on her designer shoes. "What happened?" I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. "I can't say on the phone. Please come to the old tobacco barn on Route 12, the one past the railroad crossing. I'll bring her there. 15 minutes. She hung up before I could ask another question. I turned the truck around so fast the tires screamed on the asphalt. The old tobacco barn was a relic from another era. Half the roof had caved in years ago, and nobody had used it since the Henderson family moved away. I pulled up to find a small sedan parked with its engine running. A young black woman in scrubs stepped out, and behind her, leaning against the car door like standing was the hardest thing she'd ever done, was my Sophie. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost at least 20 pounds since I last saw her 2 months ago. Her cheekbones jutted out like blades, dark circles carved hollows under her eyes. Her wrists were ringed with bruises, purple and yellow, layered like they'd been made at different times. She wore a thin cotton dress in November, and no shoes. Sophie. I was out of the truck before I finished saying her name. She collapsed into my arms. I felt every rib through that dress. She was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. "Grandma," she whispered. "Please take me away from here." Amara stood nearby, arms crossed, scanning the road in both directions. "I don't have long," she said. "Mrs. Prescott thinks I'm at the pharmacy picking up her prescription. She'll notice if I'm gone more than 30 minutes. Tell me everything," I said, holding Sophie upright. "Not here." Amara shook her head. "Take her somewhere safe. I'll come find you when my shift ends at midnight. There are things you need to know. Things I've seen in that house." I bundled Sophie into the truck, wrapped her in the old quilt I keep behind the seat. Her hands were ice. I cranked the heat to maximum and pulled onto the road. In the rearview mirror, I watched Amara's sedan disappear in the opposite direction. "Sophie, honey, talk to me. What happened?" She stared straight ahead for a long time. Then, in a voice so flat it frightened me more than screaming would have, she began to speak. It started small. "Trent's mother told me I wasn't good enough, said the Holliday family was beneath them. White trash, she called us, said I trapped her son with a pregnancy. The baby, I said, my stomach dropping. Sophie had been pregnant. 5 months along, last I heard. Where's the baby? Gone." One word, spoken like a door slamming shut. She made me take something, said it was a vitamin. I started bleeding 2 days later. Trent drove me to a private clinic, told the doctors I fell down the stairs. No one questioned it. I had to pull over. My hands were shaking too badly to drive. I sat on the shoulder of a dark Kentucky road and held my granddaughter while she told me how Vivian Prescott had systematically dismantled her life over 3 years. First, isolation, cutting Sophie off from family and friends, monitoring her phone, controlling her money. Then humiliation, making her eat separately from the family, calling her ignorant, telling her she should be grateful a Prescott even looked at a girl from a tobacco farming family. Then physical punishment, locked in the basement when she misbehaved, meals withheld for days, forced to scrub floors on her hands and knees while Vivian watched. "And Trent?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He watches. Sometimes he apologizes afterward. Brings me flowers. Says his mother is difficult but means well. He never stops her. Not once. Why didn't you call me, Sophie? Why didn't you run? She took my phone, my ID, my car keys, everything. She told me if I ran, she'd have me committed. Said she has a judge and 2 doctors who'll sign any paper she puts in front of them." Sophie looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. I believed her, Grandma. I had nothing. No money, no phone, no way to reach anyone. Amara was the only person in that house who treated me like a human being. Something ignited inside me. Not just anger. Something deeper. Something inherited, passed down through generations of Holliday women who survived worse than this and kept standing. My mother picked tobacco until her fingers bled, raised 4 girls alone, and never once let this world break her. Her mother before her survived the Depression by sheer will, and her mother before that walked 12 miles to the nearest school every day because she believed education was the one thing nobody could take from you. Vivian Prescott thought we were trash. She was about to learn what trash can do when you light it on fire. I drove to my house, helped Sophie inside, started a fire in the wood stove, made her eat soup and bread. She fell asleep on the couch within minutes. I covered her with every blanket I owned, then went to the kitchen and picked up the phone. My sister Dorothy answered on the second ring. She's 59, lives 2 counties over, retired from the county clerk's office, where she spent 28 years handling property records, court filings, and every kind of legal document that moves through the system. Dorothy knows where every skeleton is buried in this part of Kentucky because she filed the paperwork that put them there. "Dorothy, it's Connie. I know who it is. It's 11 o'clock at night. What's wrong?" I told her everything. The line went silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. "I'll be there by morning," she finally said. "Don't call the police yet. Don't call anyone. The Prescotts have people everywhere. We need to be smart about this." "I know. And Connie?" "Check Sophie for a tracking device. Those people have money for that kind of thing." After we hung up, I went through Sophie's thin dress carefully. Nothing. But then I remembered the small gold bracelet on her wrist, the one Vivian had given her as a wedding gift. I examined it under a magnifying glass. There, embedded in the clasp, was a tiny chip no bigger than a grain of rice. I put the bracelet in an envelope, walked outside, and tucked it into the mail carrier's box at the end of the driveway. Tomorrow morning, that bracelet would take a nice long ride around the county on the postal route. Let them chase that signal. Dorothy arrived at dawn, driving her ancient Buick with a trunk full of file folders. She hadn't changed. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, gray hair cropped short, a face that could make a courtroom go quiet just by looking at it. She sat at my kitchen table, spread out a legal pad, and began asking Sophie questions with the precision of a prosecutor. Dates, names, locations, specific incidents. Sophie answered everything, her voice steadier now, stronger after a night of sleep and food. The foundation, Dorothy said suddenly, looking up from her notes. The Prescott Family Foundation. You mentioned Vivian runs it. She's the director. Sophie nodded. Raises millions every year for children's hospitals, veteran programs, community development. It's her pride and joy, her public image. Did you ever see the financial records? Sophie hesitated. Once. About 4 months ago. Trent left his laptop open in the study. I saw spreadsheets, transfers to companies I'd never heard of. When I asked about it, Vivian found out within the hour. That's when things got really bad. That's when she locked me in the basement the first time. Dorothy and I exchanged a look. This wasn't just abuse. Vivian Prescott was hiding something worth killing for. Sophie, Dorothy said carefully. Do you remember any of the company names? Anything from those spreadsheets? One, Ridgeview Consulting. I remembered because there's a Ridgeview Road near the house. Dorothy wrote it down, then closed her notepad. Stay here. Both of you. I need to make some calls. She was gone for 4 hours. When she came back, her face had that look I recognized from childhood, the same expression our mother wore when she caught the landlord trying to cheat her on rent. Calm, determined, dangerous. Ridgeview Consulting doesn't exist, Dorothy said, sitting down. It was registered 8 months ago to a man named Gerald Foster. Gerald Foster died in 2019. The registered address is a vacant lot outside Louisville. A shell company, I said. One of at least 6 I've found so far. Dorothy spread papers across the table. Over the past 5 years, the Prescott Family Foundation has funneled approximately $12 million through companies that exist only on paper. The money goes in as charitable grants and comes out in offshore accounts. Can you prove it? Asked Sophie, leaning forward. Not with what I have. I need the actual foundation records, bank statements, board minutes. But I know someone who can get them. Dorothy looked at me. You remember Claudette Washington? I nodded. Claudette was a forensic accountant in Lexington who'd helped the state attorney's office bring down a corrupt county commissioner 10 years ago. She was brilliant, discreet, and she owed Dorothy a favor from a property dispute Dorothy had helped her resolve. I already called her, Dorothy continued. She's willing to look into it, but she needs access to internal documents, bank records, tax filings, anything that shows the money trail. How do we get those? I asked. Amara, said Sophie quietly. She cleans Vivian's private office. She's told me she's seen file cabinets full of records. That night, Amara came to my house as promised. She was nervous, kept glancing out the window, but she sat down and told us what she knew. She'd worked for the Prescotts for 2 years. She'd seen Vivian hit Sophie. She'd seen the locked basement. She'd heard Vivian on the phone discussing the accounts with someone she called the accountant. And she was willing to help because, as she put it, what that woman does to people in that house isn't something I can keep watching and still sleep at night. Over the next week, Amara photographed documents from Vivian's office during her cleaning shifts. Tax returns, bank statements, letters from offshore financial advisors, records of wire transfers to the shell companies Dorothy had identified. She smuggled them out in her scrubs, photographed them in her car, and returned them before anyone noticed. Meanwhile, Sophie grew stronger every day. The bruises faded. She ate regular meals. She slept through the night without screaming. And she began to get angry, not the helpless rage of a victim, but the focused, purposeful anger of a woman who has decided she will never be powerless again. On the 10th day, Dorothy sat us down with a stack of evidence that could have filled a filing cabinet. Claudette had reviewed everything and confirmed what we suspected. Vivian Prescott had embezzled over $15 million from her own charity over 6 years. The money had gone to shell companies she controlled, then to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Some of it funded a luxury apartment in Miami where she kept a man 20 years younger than her. The irony was thick enough to choke on. This woman who called us trash was living a lie held together with stolen money and a secret lover. We could go to the police, Dorothy said, but the Prescotts have the sheriff on their Christmas card list. We could go to the state attorney, but that'll take months, maybe years, and Vivian will have time to destroy evidence and come after Sophie. Then who? I asked. Her husband, said Sophie. Everyone turned to look at her. Howard Prescott. He built that family's wealth from scratch. He's 81 years old and still sharp as a razor. He despises weakness and he despises dishonesty above all things. If he finds out what Vivian's been doing with the foundation, with the money, with the affair, he won't just punish her, he'll erase her. Can we trust him? I asked. He was always decent to me, Sophie said thoughtfully. Cold, formal, old-fashioned, but decent. He once told me he respected people who worked for what they had. Said that's what built this country. Dorothy nodded slowly. I can arrange a meeting. He attends the Rotary Club breakfast in Lexington every Tuesday. Neutral ground. Public enough to be safe. The meeting was set for Tuesday at a downtown restaurant. Dorothy and I drove together. Sophie stayed home with Amara standing guard, though it bothered her to stay behind. This is my fight, she'd argued. And your fight right now is healing, I told her. We'll handle this part. Howard Prescott sat alone at a corner table when we arrived. He was a thin, upright man with a full head of white hair and hands that still looked strong despite his age. He wore a simple navy suit, no flash, no ostentation. His eyes tracked us the moment we walked in. Mrs. Holliday. He stood when we approached. Old school manners. And you must be the sister I've heard about. Dorothy, yes? Worked at the county clerk's office. 30 years, Dorothy said, sitting down. Impressive. I respect public servants. He folded his hands on the table. Your message said you had information about my wife that I needed to see urgently. I'm listening. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were photos of Sophie's bruises, documented with dates. Amara's written statement describing what she witnessed. Medical records from the private clinic where Sophie was taken after losing the baby. Howard examined each document without expression. His face was stone. Only his eyes moved, scanning every line, every photo. When he reached the picture of Sophie's bruised wrists, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. These are serious allegations, he said. They're not allegations, I replied. They're facts. Your daughter-in-law was imprisoned in your house, starved, beaten, and your wife caused her to lose a baby. My grandchild, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Your grandchild. He was silent for a long moment. Then Dorothy placed the second folder on the table. There's more, Mr. Prescott. The financial documents told their own story. Shell companies, offshore accounts, millions diverted from the charity that bore his family's name. Dorothy walked him through it methodically, pointing out each fraudulent transfer, each fake company, each signature that traced back to Vivian. Howard's face remained impassive, but I noticed his hand trembling as he turned the pages. And this, Dorothy added, producing the final set of documents. Your wife has maintained a relationship with a man named Derek Calloway for the past 4 years. He manages one of your rental properties in Miami. She purchased a condominium there under a holding company. The money came from the foundation. Howard closed the folder. He sat very still. The restaurant chattered on around us, unaware that a family empire was shifting on its foundation. What do you want? He asked finally. Safety for my granddaughter. A divorce from your son with fair compensation, a guarantee that Vivian never contacts Sophie again, and that your son is held accountable for standing by while his wife was abused. And in return, this stays between us, Dorothy said. No press, no prosecutors. You handle it internally. Howard looked at us with those sharp old eyes. You could have gone to the media, could have destroyed everything I built. We could have, I agreed. But we're not interested in destruction, Mr. Prescott. We're interested in justice and my granddaughter's safety. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. I knew she was unhappy. Who? Sophie. Last Christmas. She barely spoke, barely ate. I asked Trent if everything was all right. He said she was just adjusting to married life. Howard's voice was flat, controlled, but underneath it I heard something breaking. I should have pressed harder. I should have looked closer. You're looking now, I said. That's what matters. He stood, gathered the folders, and buttoned his jacket. Give me 1 week. I will contact you. He kept his word. 5 days later, Dorothy received a call. Vivian Prescott had been given a choice: leave the country quietly with a modest allowance and never return, or face criminal charges for embezzlement, fraud, and assault. she chose exile. She was on a plane to Portugal within 48 hours. Trent was removed from the family business. Howard personally arranged the divorce papers. Sophie received a settlement large enough to start over comfortably, along with full ownership of a small farmhouse on 20 acres that had been part of the Prescott holdings. Howard insisted she take it. For the future, he told Dorothy on the phone. For any children she might have someday. But the twist we didn't see coming arrived 3 weeks later. Sophie was sitting at my kitchen table, finally looking like herself again, color in her cheeks, weight coming back, laughing at something Dorothy said. There was a knock at the door. A courier with a sealed envelope addressed to Sophie. Inside was a letter from Claudette, the forensic accountant. During her review of the foundation records, she'd found a second set of books, not Vivian's. These records showed that Trent Prescott had been running his own scheme for the past 2 years, skimming from the family's real estate holdings, forging maintenance invoices, pocketing the difference. Smaller scale than his mother's operation, about $2 million, but damning. And attached to the letter were screenshots from Trent's personal email, forwarded by someone anonymous, in which Trent discussed with Vivian how to handle Sophie if she talked. The word committed appeared 3 times. Accident appeared once. Sophie's hands shook as she read. I put my arm around her. He wasn't just weak, she whispered. He was part of it. The whole time. I sent the documents to Howard the same day. His response was immediate and absolute. Trent was cut off entirely. Not a modest allowance. Nothing. The family trust was restructured. Howard flew to see Sophie personally. He arrived on a cold December afternoon, standing on my porch in a long wool coat, looking every one of his 81 years, but his eyes were clear and steady. May I come in? Sophie nodded. We sat in the living room. The wood stove crackled. Dorothy made coffee. Howard held the cup without drinking, just turning it in his hands. I failed you, he said to Sophie. My wife failed you. My son failed you. The family I built failed you. You're here now, Sophie said. That counts for something. I want to make it right. He set down the cup. I've removed Trent from the trust. The foundation is being restructured with independent oversight, and I've updated my will. He looked at Sophie with an expression I can only describe as determined tenderness. If you ever have children, they'll be provided for. Not because of the Prescott name, but because you showed more courage and integrity than anyone in my family has shown in decades. Sophie stared at him. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Prescott. Howard, he corrected. And this isn't debt. This is respect. After he left, the 4 of us, me, Sophie, Dorothy, and Amara, who had become a permanent fixture in our lives, sat around the table in comfortable silence. You know what Vivian called us? Sophie said suddenly. Trash, poor, uneducated, worthless trash. What do you call us? Amara asked with a smile. Sophie looked around the table at the women who had saved her life. Her grandmother who carried her out of darkness. Her great-aunt who dismantled a criminal empire with file folders and phone calls. A housekeeper who risked everything because her conscience wouldn't let her look away. I call us unbreakable, Sophie said. Winter turned to spring. Sophie moved into the farmhouse. I helped her plant a garden, tomatoes and beans and sunflowers, just like my mother taught me. Dorothy visited every weekend with casseroles and legal updates as the foundation restructuring proceeded. Amara enrolled in nursing school. She said watching me tend to Sophie's wounds made her realize she wanted to heal people for a living. Howard came by once a month. He'd sit on the porch with Sophie and talk, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing at all. He was teaching her about the family holdings, not because she asked, but because he saw in her what he'd always wanted to see in his own son. Backbone. One evening in April, Sophie and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset turn the sky to fire. The dogwoods were blooming, white blossoms scattered across the hillside like snow that refused to melt. Grandma, Sophie said, I've been thinking about Mama Loretta, my mother, who'd been gone 15 years. What about her? She raised 4 daughters alone, no money, no help, no safety net. And every single one of you turned out strong. You became a teacher. Aunt Dorothy basically ran the county clerk's office. Aunt June built her own bakery. Aunt Patsy raised 5 kids and still volunteers at the fire department. Your point? Vivian Prescott had every advantage in the world: money, status, education, connections, and she used all of it to tear people down. Mama Loretta had nothing, and she built people up. Sophie looked at me. That's not about money or class. That's about what you're made of. I reached over and took her hand. Your great-grandmother used to say, they can take your house, your land, your money, and your name, but they cannot take what's planted in your spine. What's planted in our spine? Sophie smiled. Iron, I said. Pure holiday iron. She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. A real laugh, from the belly, the kind that shakes loose all the fear and pain and grief and lets light pour in. 6 months later, Sophie started her own nonprofit, a small organization dedicated to helping women escape abusive households, providing legal aid, temporary housing, and job training. She called it Iron Foundation. Dorothy handled the legal paperwork. Amara, now in her 2nd semester of nursing school, volunteered on weekends. Howard Prescott made the first donation. Anonymous, of course, but we knew. When the local newspaper wrote a profile on Sophie's work, they asked about her background. She told them the truth. Not every detail, but enough. I know what it feels like to be trapped, she said. To believe you have no options, no voice, no value. I know what it feels like to have someone tell you that you're nothing. And I know what it feels like to discover that the people who love you will walk through fire to bring you home. The reporter asked about her family. My grandmother carried me out of the worst moment of my life, Sophie said. My great-aunt took apart the machine that was hurting me, piece by piece, with nothing but public records and determination. A woman I barely knew risked her job and her safety because she couldn't watch injustice happen and stay silent. Those are the people who raised me. Those are the people I come from. I read that article sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where Dorothy spread her legal pads, where Amara delivered stolen evidence in her trembling hands, where Howard Prescott sat and surrendered his pride to do the right thing. I cried, not from sadness, but from something bigger than sadness or happiness, from knowing that the story hadn't ended in that dark basement. It had started there. Vivian Prescott called us trash. She looked at our modest house, our secondhand clothes, our calloused hands, and she saw nothing worth respecting. She couldn't have been more wrong. Because the thing about people like us, people who come from red clay and tobacco fields and hand-me-down quilts, is that we know how to survive. We've been doing it for generations. It's bred into us, written into every wrinkle on our hands, every story passed down at kitchen tables, every lesson taught not in classrooms, but in the daily act of refusing to be broken. We are not trash. We are iron. And iron doesn't break. It bends when it must. It heats and reshapes, but it does not break. Not today. Not ever. If this story touched your heart, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to Jewel Revenge. It helps us keep sharing stories like this every single day. Now go check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now. You don't want to miss it. Stay blessed, stay strong, and we'll see you next time.